The other thing I wanted to ask you about, and I don't know if you want to get into it at all, and I completely understand if you don't want to get into it at all, but yeah, I mean, this past couple of weeks has been crazy with this other podcast basically calling you, Chris, Tig, Boone, Oz liars. And yeah, and you've seen some of the responses too on X that you and I have responded to with people saying, "Oh, well, I think some of them don't even have bad intentions, but this idea of like, oh, one day I hope the truth comes out on this issue." And it's like the truth is very much out in this issue.
Right.
You really have two major books that you could read, which is 13 Hours in Benghazi, Know the Enemy. There's also stuff like the book Brad Podoliska came out with. There's plenty out there. There's so many firsthand accounts of what happened. And it really is a shame that someone could just go on a podcast and say, well, I heard different. And I heard that the movie was pure fiction. And then people will say, oh, wow, they're hiding something, you know?
Well, every movie's Hollywood's version of a book, right? So like I always say, Bub is three characters rolled into one. I mean, it's hard for me to watch because how I know people, they're not portrayed that way in the movie, but the movie is Hollywood's version of something. So yes, the 13 hours is what the guys experienced at the time on the ground, right? Like we say, Benghazi, know the enemy is like a decade-long investigation, identifying the terrorists and then getting everything straight what happened on the ground. That's why our book has the best timeline, because we don't just have the timelines, we have it from the CCTV of the annex, the CCTV of the consulate, and then, unlike all the other books, we include where we can the pieces of the terrorists in the timeline, right? So we have the full picture in there. But to be honest, these are just some, remember, we don't know what the Department of Defense officers have said. This is three podcasters starting drama. So, we don't really want to play into that. Now, I did get lots of questions. Apparently, they were saying, one of the biggest things is the Department of Defense people negotiated for the ambassador's body, and that was been lied about. So I had a ton of questions on that. Again, we don't know if that's what they said because they haven't played anything that they said. So I did answer that on X and got a bunch of crazy people. But really, if a lot of people don't understand this, so the ambassador was found hours later. He was basically on the side of kind of a bed, like he might have been trying to get, low under the smoke or something. And so some Libyans, this is well after the attackers left, hours after, it was after the looters. It was now kind of neighbors were going around and seeing what happened. And they saw him on the ground. So there was two gentlemen. They ran outside and they saw a Libyan army officer and said, hey, can you come and help us? There's a man on the floor. So they ran in and they pull him out. And then someone actually starts recording. So as they walk out with him, they set him on the ground and they say, Allahu Akbar, because they think he's alive. And so then they have a discussion. We need to run him to the hospital. So they carry him to the hospital. And that's when that picture gets clicked in the video that came on like front of New York Times and stuff. And people
Yeah.
think he's being dragged. So he got moved to a vehicle, and the vehicle was owned by a neighbor who knew the ambassador. So the neighbor alone brought the ambassador to Benghazi Medical Center. This isn't the terrorist hospital. That was Al Jalil. He was in the public, safe hospital. And unfortunately, the doctor did try for a long time. I've read the whole medical record. He really tried to revive him, but he arrived deceased, unfortunately. Well, when that movement happened of the ambassador, when they're carrying him, the gentleman behind him in that picture or the video, if you've seen the video, is the Libyan army officer, and he has a phone in his mouth. So he grabbed the phone off the floor by the ambassador because he's like, I need to make notifications of this American. None of them really knew who it was, the ambassador that they're carrying him out, because it was just locals in there. So he then, when the neighbor takes the ambassador, he starts calling all the numbers in the phone in his mouth, right? And he's like, hey, he's at the hospital. Well, that's when everybody thought, oh, this could be a ruse. We don't want to go to the hospital because we could be ambushed there. So what they did is they called the Libyan, his name's Boubacar Habib, and said, hey, can you go or send someone to see if it's actually the ambassador? And he said, hey, the terrorists are asking for my name on the consulate. I shouldn't go in case it is an ambush. I'll send someone else. And he called a Libyan official named Mustafa al-Saglisi. And Mustafa al-Saglisi went to the hospital. He knew the ambassador well. If you've read our book, he's also the brother of one of the attackers, Khalid al-Saglisi, an Al-Qaeda member. And so he confirmed the ambassador was there. And then it was Mustafa working with the Ministry of Interior, so the Libyan government, who then move the body to the airport when we had planes now and humans at the airport to leave. So it was just two Libyans who recovered his body. But again, there didn't need to be negotiations. His body wasn't held by like enemy forces. So yeah, that's been one of these whole arguments apparently with these podcasters. Boone had heard that they were going to throw Benghazi under the bus actually back in November. And they're just up in Orlando. And he actually had friends on the show. So he reached out, tried to contact, and then he got feedback from one of his friends. He said, oh, he laughed that you wanted to talk to him. And he was saying, oh, good, the Benghazi guys are getting all riled up. So this is just a game to them. Boone tried again in December. And then, as you know, they started releasing those teasers. Then they started. So I asked Boone, who are these people? And I blocked all of them. And then one of them said, we reached out to Sarah and politely, and she went talking. It's like, if you wrote me a DM, I never saw it. But then they started playing me and throwing me in it. And it's like, it's just foolishness, as because I told you the three issues we're dealing with is one, the Libyans are going to attack here. And you're wasting time talking about and lying about how a body was moved to an airport, right? When we actually have Libyan terrorists on US soil. So I find it like ridiculous, to be honest.
Yeah, I really don't know anything about this show. I just saw the clip when it came out. I, saw your comments, Take's comments, and Chris's, but just from the little I know, their MO does seem to be attacking high profile veterans, who do stuff publicly, whether it's podcasting or anything like that, or who have been a part of high profile important events. And I do think it's because like this space is so saturated that you need to find some way to stand out, but this is like a really negative way to make yourself stand out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like a bully, and I don't like someone who tries to like play like they almost are making a joke out of like getting under the people in Benghazi. I'm sorry, you're messing with heroes. You're messing with people who hunted down their own attackers. You're messing with people trying to prevent attacks on the US homeland. Like, get over yourselves. Like, I cannot even waste my time on it. Like, we've had team meetings on it, as Kanto said, and
Yeah.
talked about it, and we're all on the same page. If they want to ramble on and a bunch of people want to like play games and try to bully us, like we'll just block you. Like, you're not worth the time, right? Like, we just are so beyond this kind of stuff. Like, we're not in high school.
Do you think this member of Delta Force that they're referring to kind of as their source, do you think this guy's going to come out and do podcasts, write a book, that type of thing? Do you think that's his plan?
Well, yeah, so he's retiring. And I have heard he doesn't like how he was portrayed in 13 Hours. He had previous issues with GRS, personal stuff prior to the attacks. So it's not surprising me this is going to come out and he wants his, I don't know, piece of the pie. They all think we got $1 million or something. It's like, if you saw
Yeah.
how much me and Boone paid to hunt down their own attackers, we're in debt. But anyway, if they want to think that, they can go be rich off Benghazi, let them. I mean, Tonto still is an insurance adjuster. But anyway, regardless of that stuff.
He does do well public speaking, though. I will say, like, yeah.
Yeah, but let him. Like, we don't care. I mean, there's, I don't know, 13, 14, 15 books on Benghazi. Like, we don't care. But it's like, don't cause issues where there doesn't need to be any because you now want your piece of the pie, right? Like, there are bigger issues going on than your ego.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the positive thing that Chris said about this whole ordeal on the last podcast that we did, and he's posted about it, is that there's a reason why we've never had the other guys on the show except for Tig really early on when we started. And it wasn't like the best podcast because it was audio only and we were kind of just getting started. But like Chris is very open about this. He wasn't really talking to any of the other guys. I don't really know why. I know that it's personal stuff. I know it's nothing like major that happened, but there were certain reasons he didn't want to talk to those guys. And from what he said, he got back on the phone with all of them, and including you, and everybody is on the same page now. And Chris has said he'd gladly have those guys on anytime now. Thanks for checking out Battle Line Podcast. This is just a smaller clip from our latest episode, which you can check out in its entirety by clicking here. While you're watching, be sure to hit the subscribe button and thumbs up the video to show your support. Now, if you'd really like to help us out, click the thanks button below to make a donation. It goes directly to us in keeping Battle Line Podcast going